Right, we're live. Thanks for joining us at the Nick and Matt's Football Podcast. Today I have a guest called Robert Santonna. So, Robert, who are you? What do you do? And what teams do you support?
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Nick. It's a real pleasure to be on here. So I suppose we'll start with the teams I support. I would say I support Bournemouth, but I do a lot of work with Weymouth, and they're also perhaps my more local team. Obviously, I grew up in Weymouth, so that's kind of been there since I was young. Currently, I'm a student studying A-levels, but then I also do football commentary for Weymouth and around kind of non-league. A little bit of sports writing and stuff for a couple of outlets. Just kind of building a bit of a portfolio at the minute. But yeah, I think I've covered just about all the questions then. So hopefully that answers.
So when you say football commentary, is that like in the stadium shouting the goals, or is it a different type of commentary, or over voiceover, or what kind of commentary is that?
Yeah, so it's kind of the live commentary that, I mean, it's not quite the same production value you'd see in the Premier League. It's very much me, my headset and a laptop, just kind of getting on with things. But yeah, it's live commentary. It gets streamed out to like a streaming service that Weymouth fans or whatever fans tune into. So yeah, that's been pretty good. I've been doing that for, I think it's started my third season now. So yeah, starting to get the hang of things.
Season 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. No, and that's for Weymouth. So we'll get back to Weymouth in a second. I'm just going to get a few through a few Bournemouth questions. I guess I just want a general overview. What's been your impression of Bournemouth this season so far?
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because you look at the results we've had, and if you actually look at the wins and losses, you would say it might be a bit of a mixed start. But if you then actually break down the results and look at maybe perhaps decisions that haven't quite gone our way, I saw a graphic this yesterday. Had there been no VAR, we'd be sat 5th, and it's really? Kind of
yeah.
So it's a case of I'm really happy with the start. Outsiders may be thinking they're about leveling out, but I think the data doesn't exactly portray how our season's gone. I think we've actually started really well. I think that kind of we've been due perhaps a little bit of a big win. Obviously that coming against Arsenal. So yeah, I've been pretty pleased on the whole.
Yeah, and when you say with the VAR, I guess you're talking about Otawa's goal from up here against Newcastle, and I think there was one in the first game of the season, if I'm not mistaken. There was, but we've always been treated badly, so to speak. We've never really had our luck, and I'm amazed at the amount of penalties we've been getting in the last, or at least this season. Yeah, it's like it took about maybe 2.5 years before the next, before another penalty. So yeah, so how long have you been following Bournemouth for?
So I think my first Bournemouth game was in 2015. So I would have been, I'd have been 9, I think.
Right.
So yeah, that was the I think pre-season friendly. I'd say 2015, one of those ones. So yeah, I think my kind of family on my dad's side grew up as Chelsea fans. But then of course my dad moved down south, and it's a case of, I never really had an involvement with Chelsea because it's miles away. So it's just a case of finding a local team that I could get behind. And yeah, I think it'll be the same with what a lot of fans will say. The Bournemouth story is something that I think resonates with quite a lot of people, and is probably the reason why we have so many kind of foreign fans, because it's a story you can get behind. And I think it's great to see that story kind of be built up to where it is now, and to actually be a really successful Premier League team is pretty exciting.
Yeah, I think a lot of especially from America, a lot of followers always quote that NBC.
Yeah,
I think it was an hour long documentary. I can't remember what was it called. Was it Anything is Possible or something like that?
It was something like that, documenting that kind of era, wasn't it? That early kind of 2013, 14, 15-ish time. I think I haven't seen it. The one that I remember was the one the club put out, maybe 2017 or so. That's the one that I saw. But yeah, apparently there seems to be this American one that brought a lot of fans in, which is great.
That did.
Yeah.
And that's why when you had Steve Fletcher recalling when he scored that goal against Grimsby and stuff. But I guess 2015 is a pretty good was a good year to start following Bournemouth, because Premier League. So yeah, that was awesome. So what would you say in all that time? What was your most memorable Bournemouth game? Because I'm
That's a
sure
great
there's a few, but
Yeah, the one that just sprung to mind, I think it was 2019 maybe, Southampton away. I think we won 3-1. It was I think Callum Wilson, Nathan Ake, and there was another scorer. I can't remember, but that one away at St Mary's was pretty good. I was there for the first time we beat Arsenal at home. So again, I think around 2018, 2019.
yeah,
Forest, obviously the promotion game for the Championship, that stands out.
of course, yeah,
One of those. There's been a couple of good away games in there, not just because of the result, but just being able to follow Bournemouth to these big Premier League stadiums.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
if I had to narrow it down, I'd probably say Forest at home, Southampton away, and a rogue one would be I think maybe Man United in the same season at home. Josh King's little flicked over the defender, smashed it in.
Was that the
Yeah,
1-0?
yeah,
Was
I
that
think
the
it
one?
was. I think
Yeah.
it finished 1-0. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I always remember when you talk about the Forest game in the Championship. I always remember Philip Billing doing this.
Little look
looking
across.
for options. I mean, that was the best. The most unexpected goal, and especially Keeper Moore. You expect him to head him, and not kick him in the back of the net. And the other side, what would you reckon the most depressing or worst game that you've seen Bournemouth?
Well, I suppose if you're staying on the theme of Southampton, it was the 1-0 loss a couple of seasons ago under Gary O'Neill. I think Che Adams scored for Southampton in kind of December, just dark day. That was in the period where Gary O'Neill wasn't considered to be the saviour. But yeah, I would say that plus. I think that one stands out really. I didn't go to the Liverpool 9-0. I had tickets, but I didn't go. So perhaps saved myself that day.
I was
Yeah, I
there.
don't. Oh, really? Yeah, it was one of those. You feel for the fans that have made that long trip. And yeah, get
It was
sent
a long
home
trip.
with not a lot to shout about. Yeah, I think to be honest, I've been lucky enough not really to go to any games where we've been absolutely smashed. I think there might have been a few Man City games which we've just never been in, but
Oh,
that's Man City, so
you
you
never.
can't really.
That's our big. That's our big. That's our big. It's on the big to-do list to actually get at least a point or three against Man City, but we just don't have any luck. I think we've lost all the games, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's just difficult, isn't it? Because perhaps under Iraola we have a better chance than we probably have done in recent years.
Mm.
Just because you see how he sets up against Arsenal, he goes all out attack pretty much, and yeah, that seems to pay off. Whether it will against City, you're just never quite sure. I think Arsenal were very much
Yeah.
had their injuries, whereas if Man City have a fully fit squad, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. And I think they always have a replacement squad as well. Although we're talking about injuries, Rodri's out. He's out for quite some time. I'm not sure how long, but I think his absence has sort of got them a little tiny dip in form, or winning by the finest of margins, especially last, against Wolves and other teams like that. But so going on to, what would you say, which AFC Bournemouth player has impressed you the most? I was going to say the most this season. Probably be fair to say, because something doing it over the course of 9-10 years is, I guess, pretty hard. But especially this season, I was going to say apart from Semenya,
yeah, yeah.
which I guess he's impressed everyone.
Yeah, I would say he's probably been the star man since Dom's left, which I'm glad we've been able to find. I know a lot of people would rather it have been Evan Nilsson given the money spent, but it just matters that someone stepped up. But yeah, I would say this season, I'd say there's a couple of names. I would say Kirkes seems to have upped his game a little bit, seems to be a bit more switched on to actually being successful with the club. Obviously, he had those kind of spells where he had his eye on the way out. He had Chelsea, Man United knocking down the door. To be honest, I think January will be the exact same, I would say, given how good he's been, since the start of the season. But in a Bournemouth shirt, he's been superb this season. Who else would I say? I would say, to be honest, I mean, it's not really it's not a superstar pick, but I say Adam Smith again is just secure. He's gone into another Premier League season with Bournemouth in the Premier League and doesn't really look out of place, which I think is admirable, given he's getting on a bit.
He is. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say he's one of those players. I think he went through a period where everyone thought he might be kind of done. I would say maybe just when we come back up to the Premier League, we obviously had Max Aarons in as well, and he seemed like he was going to take over. But it seems like Iraola just seems to call on Smith in the big games, and he seems to deliver.
Yeah, he's Mr. Reliable, isn't he? I guess
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I always love his little tricks. Like he always get other players into trouble. From the opposition team.
So I suppose that's the experience you get with so many Premier League games under your belt now. But yeah, I'd say maybe a third one I'd probably got to say Dango. I would say, despite the misfortune with his goals, I would say he's looked really, really promising. It's always been a case of, can he nail down a position? Because obviously we saw him a bit at left back, seen him on the wing. At Lorient, he could play up top, but that's not going to happen for Bournemouth, really. So yeah, I just think if he can nail down the left wing position, he's got all the physical attributes. I just think he's obviously growing more as a player, and he will. I think we will see the best of him this season, hopefully.
Do you think that left wing position? Did he just fill in for that role just the one-off time, and he just happened to really excel in that position? Because that was his natural position. He was a winger, wasn't he?
Yeah. So I think for Lorient, he was on either wing and a striker, and then obviously we had a bit of a left back crisis. And yeah, I think it was just a case of, I mean, to be honest, he can jump about the highest I've seen a Bournemouth player in recent years. He can, he can leap for a ball. So I suppose if they've got a kind of a fast winger trying to get him behind, he can either jump and head the ball, or he's got the pace, I suppose, to keep up with him. But I mean, apart from the physical side of things, he actually looks to be a pretty promising defender in the tackling and the reading the game. Probably not. He's no Kirkes, is he? Let's be honest, because that's not his natural position. But it is squad depth in a position we are slightly light on. So it's probably not the worst thing in the world that he can play there. I don't think he will for a little bit, unless, God forbid, Kirkes does pick up an injury. But yeah, I think he just picked it up, and it was a case of, actually, you can kind of do a job here, and we don't really have the other options.
And I think having players that can play in several positions is always a bonus for the manager, isn't it? So yeah, that's good. I noticed also Kirkes hasn't had that many yellows this season, because normally it was like one a game or one every second game and stuff like that. So I guess it's right when you say he's really settling into the Bournemouth shirt and stuff, and I guess that's another part of Kirkes is getting less bookings. So at the start he was almost like another Lerma, wasn't he? Because Lerma was getting booked all the time. So
yeah, I think he's definitely maybe grown up's the wrong word, but he definitely seems to have adapted to the Premier League a little bit better this season. I think he's aware of when he can go flying in and when he has to read the game a little bit better and not kind of get exploited. So I think that was one of the issues sometimes, is he'd come bombing forward and he'd leave a massive space. And with the standard of Premier League wingers, you're not really going to want to leave that space. But yeah, I think this season he's definitely upped his game, which is great. I think either for the club in terms of playing or for his selling value, either way, I think Bournemouth are on to a winner with him.
And he's also had a Euro behind his belt, so the recent Euros. So he's had 3 games with Hungary. I don't think Hungary progressed to the next stage in Euro 24 in Germany, but I guess just having that tournament experience as well and playing, maybe that's just an extra feather in his cap. But it was just something he's learned in the lead up to this coming coming season. So just going on to what you're doing in journalism, I know you do this stuff for Weymouth, and do you do any coverage of Bournemouth, or what platforms do you use? Or tell us about it.
Yeah, so for Bournemouth, I suppose I do kind of my own writing, which goes on Twitter and stuff like that in kind of long form. And then I write for a publishing company called Vavel, which is Bournemouth based, and that will just be kind of stuff to do with match day in the season. So like a preview, pre-match quotes. So from Iriola's press conference today, I've got to sit and have a look at that and then write up the key bits. So, I mean, for example, Alex Scott, I'm sure we'll probably come on to it. He's not going to be out for minimum 6 weeks. It's going to be longer, I think, anyway. And then Sarah also isn't traveling tomorrow or today, whichever day they're going. So yeah, it's a case of doing stuff like that. And then in the transfer window, I always love. It's one of my favorite times to be kind of in and around the football space, because you meet all these different kind of people speaking about potential signings. So it's like Dean Howson. I ended up speaking to loads of people from Italian football and people that know him. And it's like, yeah, I feel like it's a great opportunity just to kind of enhance your football knowledge a bit more. Like you hear about all these players and clubs. Like I think a lot of Bournemouth fans will be lying if they said they knew a lot about Dean Howson before he joined. There'll be a couple that have watched him. Right. But personally, I had to do a fair amount of digging and research to research who he was. So yeah, for in terms of the journalism stuff, I would then write bits about him and bits about signings. So like Evan Nilsson, I did a bit on him, Howson. So yeah, it's just a case of just finding talking points and just kind of seeing what I can find out about them, really, which is great because I mean it gives me an opportunity to write something and actually produce something with the things that I'm learning, and also they're just in my head now, and it can only be a benefit for kind of the future kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember you had that X space or Twitter space in, I think it was the beginning of the season, and exactly right. I mean, it's obviously a passion you have about the start of the season and the transfer window. And I think how many people, because I joined that, I remember that was about 6:30 in the morning here in Australia, and I joined your Twitter space. It must have been about 30 people or something like that, or probably more.
Yeah, I can't really remember. I think, so normally I would do them with a guy called Matt in the kind of Bournemouth Twitter space. So he would run them and then I'd come on as a host. But I think for whatever reason, he wasn't available. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll just kind of take the opportunity to get a couple of other people in. I got yourself, I got Josh White Jones in. And yeah, it's just a case of getting similar kind of heads together and just chatting football, which I suppose can never be a bad thing, can it?
Yeah, that's right. And so do any of these exercises actually form part of the course? Like, for example, at college, would they say, look, you've got to produce a 1,500 word thing or report? Are you able to really combine your passion of football writing and broadcasting or whatever with your studies? I mean, I guess the answer is yes, but how does that?
Well, to be honest, I actually don't. It's a case of, so I study A levels, so I do English, PE, and geography. So the only one it could potentially link with would be English, but to be honest, it doesn't really link. I get, anything that I do write. Sometimes if I think I might as well show it to one of my teachers, see what they think about it. Yeah, it tends to be everything that I do is very much in spare time, which is often hard to find, which is why during the summer I'm obviously able to be a little bit more active. But yeah, once it gets down to kind of like the key school years, it's very much finding the time to do worthwhile stuff is difficult. But yeah, it's always been a case of just, I've always been around football, and I just kind of get to a point now where it's like I might as well try and get something from it, if that makes sense. Obviously I've always been going as a fan, and I still go as a fan, and that's the reason I love football so much, is that you can just go as a fan, but then also doing the bits around it seems to make it a bit more of a whole experience. I don't know, it just seems to be now you get to feel a little bit more like you're part of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So when you finish at A levels, what's the next step for you? Is it to further studies or get a work placement, so to speak? I'm not sure if that's the right term, but or would you rather just get straight into football, or what's your plans for the future?
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because I think I'm lucky enough to have a couple of contacts in the kind of journalism space now, where you speak to them and they say, I went down this path, this is the best for you. And I think that's all well and good taking advice, and it's worthwhile advice and stuff I learn a lot from. But I think it's very much a personal pathway. So at the minute, I'm kind of looking into apprenticeships with kind of sports media companies, not really looking into the uni aspect of it, to be honest, just because I think I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? Because I would much rather get out there and start doing stuff now than
Yeah.
wait another 3 years. So I think something like an apprenticeship would work best for me in a case of you do a little bit
Okay.
studying, but the majority of it is real life application.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just kind of seeing what turns up really. I mean, yeah, if any other positions come up, then I'm kind of out there looking. But for now,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just a case of just seeing what doors open up further down the line, really.
I guess it's if you follow your passion, it's you'll never work a day in your life because you just love doing what you're doing. So makes sense completely. Yeah. Have you actually ever been to a AFC Bournemouth press conference, like a pre-game thing,
No,
or
no, I haven't had the opportunity. I think it's a case of obviously they don't allow loads of people in. I would say the Bournemouth Echo go. I know Bournemouth Uni send a couple of their students just for experience.
right?
So yeah, I haven't had the opportunity. Yeah, and it's a case of I'm not sure unless I'm involved in any of those kind of
Mm, okay.
any areas. But yeah, it's I mean I catch up on them regardless. Like I said, with the writing stuff I've got to do later on today at some point. I
Yeah.
don't know. Sometimes they live stream them, which is great. Other times it's just a case of reading through what else has come out and just
Right.
picking bits. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I watched I watched today's one, but I was doing something else, and the alert for the press conference came up, but then it was another half an hour until Andoni came on onto the onto the desk and started talking, and then it was well over within 10 minutes. So I'm thinking, especially if people are actually sitting waiting for it to happen, I'm thinking that's a long time to wait, you know. But I guess it'll be an experience. One day that'll happen. That'll be good. Um, right. So you mentioned Weymouth. Sorry. Now they're called the Terras. Why are they called the Terras?
So that originally comes from the color of the kit being like a terracotta color. It was kind of like
Right.
a dark claret. Yeah, I think I'm not sure what other people would take it as, but I doubt many people would initially go to that. So yeah, that is the reasoning behind it. Yeah, so it's always been claret. Well, it's not always been claret and blue, but for the last long time, it's been claret and blue.
Right. Okay. And have they ever been in the football league, the EFL,
No,
or
so closest they've got is the National League, so step below League Two. So we were last in that in 2020, so kind of during the COVID seasons. But the problem with the step up is that a lot of teams struggle to get from National League South, which is where Weymouth are, into
yeah,
the National League because you find, I mean, if you look at the clubs that were in the National League when Weymouth were there, you had Notts County, you had Wrexham, Chesterfield, Stockport. You had a lot of teams that aren't in that league anymore, but all
yeah,
of them were full time pretty much. So either you take the risk of staying part time, so training once a week, not having
mm,
quite the full playing experience, or you go full time, and it costs a heck of a lot more money. So
yeah.
Weymouth tried it. They tried the full time model, and when we went back down, we were about 200 grand in debt. So yeah,
Wow,
yeah,
wow.
it ruins a lot of teams. Teams try and live
Mm,
outside their means to hope that they stay there and hope that they can kind of see what sticks and hope they stay up for long enough to be sustainable. But when you stay up for a season and then go down the next, you're going to struggle, I suppose. So yeah,
mm,
it was a case of we came back down, lost a lot of money in the league above. So for the last 2-3 seasons, it's definitely been consolidating, trying to stay up in this league, to be honest. So the first season we came down, we stayed up on the final day on goal difference, I think.
oh my
So literally,
goodness.
yeah, I went on that final trip. So from Weymouth all the way out to Dover, so about a 4-hour trip.
Yeah,
And it was a case of all we needed. We think we needed to win, and there were two other teams that finished below us in the end that stayed up though. So it was literally we went from being in the relegation zone. To be fair, because we start with W, we were in the relegation zone for the
oh yeah,
entirety of the season. So we started there because of alphabetical, stayed there, and then there's this whole graph line, and then it just goes one up at the end, which yeah was definitely slightly nerve wracking the entire season, thinking we could go back-to-back relegations and still
Oh
be
man.
pretty in the hole. Yeah, again, it's a case of, it's another reason I think quite a few fans kind of resonate with it locally, just because of the story that's behind it, similar to Bournemouth, really. I suppose I mean, obviously Mark Molesley's played a pretty big part in both clubs' history. Obviously with
Yes.
Weymouth, he did double promotion, Southern League, National League South. Sorry, National League South, National League promotions. And then obviously he's back now. But yeah.
So so you've been there twice. So is this his first year, the second time around, or?
Yeah, so he came back over the summer. Towards the end of the season, he got confirmed, but he got the summer, and obviously this is his first proper season back since I think 2019. He left, went to Southend, and Southend is obviously a pretty troubled place at that point, financially, and yeah, so he found that pretty difficult. But yeah, back now, and I think on paper we've struggled. Currently bottom of the league, not gone perhaps to plan, but I think it's similar to Bournemouth in a way where you can look at the results and the results tell one story, and then if you actually watch the performances and see how close it is, it probably tells a slightly different one. So most recently on Tuesday we played against Bath,
Bath
away.
City.
Yeah, and we were drawing 1-1. Very much momentum was with us. We're pushing on to go and win the game, and then we had a man sent off, a second yellow for what the referee thought was a dive that wasn't a dive.
Yeah, and Mark got booked as well, didn't he? Because he protested.
Yeah. So he got booked on the sideline, but he got booked in a way which again just probably sums up the way referees treat managers at that level. It's very much, I think you see the referees think they're better than everyone just because it's a slightly lower league. So Molesley was purely speaking to the guy that was coming off. He told me this after the game. He was speaking to the guy that just got sent off. And the fourth official's just gone over to him and said, look, ref's going to give you a yellow for that. And he didn't say anything. He was speaking to the player that just got sent off. But he's already got 2 touchline bans this season. So he'll be hoping not to rack up enough yellows for a third.
He's almost as bad as Iraola, because he's been banned a few times, isn't he?
Yeah.
So at least they got that in common.
Yeah, literally. I think it's either been Iraola or Pablo Della Torre, who's the fitness coach. So last season he got sent off quite a few times. But yeah, it's always fiery on the bench for both sides, I'd say.
Yeah, but you know what? As a football fan, I wouldn't have it any other way, because that's what gives. I don't know. Following your local team, it gives you that extra. I don't know what it is. Maybe edge, but not competitive edge, but just get those extra quirky things, like, and having a manager with a lot of characters is awesome. I remember an interview Mark did when he was at Aldershot. Do you remember what I'm going to talk about?
Yeah, I know what you're going to speak about. Yeah.
I went on the YouTube and found it, and I thought it was the best thing ever. But I want to know about those 4 Japanese talking dogs in a briefcase. Did he ever tell you what they are?
Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting, and actually, there's a story behind that interview which I'm not sure a whole lot of people know, but I've managed to get wind of it. Basically, that interview wasn't supposed to go out. What he tends to do sometimes, he hasn't done it with Weymouth yet that I know about. But yeah, sometimes after, I don't know, whatever game, whether it's a stressful one or not, he seems to do like just to get kind of a settle down speaking kind of thing. You know what I mean? He just kind of gets ready for an interview just by doing that. That then got filmed, and I'm not sure whether it should have or not. I don't really know. That ended up making its way out onto the internet, and it went pretty viral. Yeah, I mean, obviously, the actual contents of what he's saying, I'm not sure anyone else has got an idea other than him. But what I do know is perhaps that wasn't the post-match interview he expected to see go out in that evening. So yeah,
it was too much of a temptation for any journalist not to publish that. I reckon that was fun. I've got a question about. He says Robbie's over there. It's the first time he's been quiet today. He wasn't referring to you, was he?
No. So that would have
No,
been
okay,
that was the goalkeeping coach, Robbie. I think Robbie Yates, who was his goalkeeper coach at the time.
right,
Um,
okay.
yeah, nothing to do with me on that one.
No, that's right. That's okay. Yeah, because I do remember seeing that like a couple of years ago, and I'm thinking, oh, that's Mark Molesley, and then it sort of disappeared, and then I was just doing a little bit of research because I like to look. I follow a number of teams in Dorset, mostly Wimborne and Poole Town.
Yeah.
Poole Town because once in 1991 I had a trial with them.
Oh, really?
And I was a disaster anyway. I didn't have any proper football boots, but even if I did, it still would have been a disaster. And yeah, Wimborne Town is obviously that first Dorset team to make Wembley a trip to Wembley and win the FA Vase. I was talking about 1992. So I do keep an eye on a number of Dorset-based teams. I been to Weymouth once, 2012, because I don't get over there very often to the UK. And actually, in terms of following Dorset teams, what would be Weymouth's biggest rival? Would it be Yeovil Town or Dorchester Town?
Yeah. So I suppose there's no question that Weymouth's biggest rivals are Yeovil, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeovil. Okay.
And I'll come back on that. But yeah, I was on Dorchester. I would say that obviously they're probably the closest team to us.
Right.
You could count probably Portland, but they've never really been in our league. Whereas Dorchester, we spent, I don't really know how long, but there was a time period, probably 2013 to maybe 2016 time. We were in their league and we would play them every Boxing Day. And those are the games that I remember going to.
Really? Okay.
In the earlier days, yeah. So it would always be Weymouth Dorchester, and then obviously we weren't really in Yeovil's league until we went up to the National League, so 2019 2020 time, and we didn't beat them once in that time. We had an FA Cup game at home, I think in 2020, which we ended up drawing, then lost on penalties. So yeah, it's interesting. We played them last season in the National League South because they got relegated into our league last season. We played them at home on one of the final games where I think if results went their way and Yeovil won, they'd have won the league that day. It would have to been a mental result swing, so they probably weren't going to do it. But the fact that they could have at Weymouth was definitely slightly concerning going into that game. And yeah, we went a goal up after about 20 minutes or so. I was fortunate enough to be commentating on that game, and
Cool.
that's probably the most mental I've been, I would say. Within the realms of composure, but still, that was probably the most excitable goal I've probably seen. And then there was an incident in the crowd, like a medical incident, and they stopped the game. And then it was asked between the two managers whether they wanted to continue. I think everyone in the stadium expected it to continue, but because Yeovil didn't want to lose that game, they kind of persuaded the referee to call it off, which still to this day is very frustrating because technically we have a win against Yeovil, but it's got a little asterisk next to it saying game didn't finish. It got to about 78 minutes. And Yeovil fans will tell you that they tried to get back in the game and score. They didn't. It was always if we were going to go and get a second before they got an equaliser, which is frustrating, but at the same time it was a good day anyway. But yeah, I would say Yeovil is probably Weymouth's biggest rival by quite a long way.
And there's games like that that add to the folklore, like the things that you just said just now, you just told me the story, and that will only add extra spice for the next time that you guys meet, win whichever league, whether it's an FA Cup or any other competition. So, okay, so I noticed Dorchester's Town is now managed by Tommy Killett. Is that right? Tommy Killett had been at Poole Town for almost 20 years, or maybe even 20 years, and stuff like that. So I've never actually been to a Dorchester Town game, but you say that rivalry is only that stems from that time. Obviously, the distance being the closest, and that time of 2013, 2016 when you were
I would say it stems further back than that, for
right,
sure.
okay.
But the bit that I remember playing against Dorchester was around then. But it's been I'm trying to think of the teams that Weymouth have played the most. I think is Yeovil, Dorchester, and Bath. I think. I've got a guy that really, Duncan, helps me out with the stats and stuff for my commentary and everything.
Yep.
So he keeps the stats for Weymouth. I'll have to double check that with him. But yeah, I think Dorchester and Yeovil and Bath we probably have played the most times. So I think rivalries get built like that as well. And then also the location thing with Dorchester as well. And we've had quite a few players cross over as well in the time period. We've had players that have played for them. We've had players that play for us, kind of thing. So yeah, I would say Yeovil are probably Weymouth's biggest, then Dorchester, and beyond that, I think you're probably only looking at. I wouldn't say Bath. I probably wouldn't. I would say it's probably just Yeovil and Dorchester.
Right. Okay. Because I noticed Torquay is kind of close, but they've always been traditionally either an EFL side.
Yeah, they've always been
they did go under, didn't they? And then they came back again.
Yeah, so they're
I can't remember.
Yeah, they're under a little bit of supervision with Neil Warnock, I think, at the minute. I think he's down there now.
Neil Warnock. I was going to say, because of these really managers with character. I mean, Neil Warnock's is up there.
Yeah,
Didn't you say?
Sure. Yeah, I think there aren't many. There aren't many managers like him. I would say a dying breed. Put it that way. I would say.
Yes. You know what I used to do? Here in Australia, we've got Optus Sport, and so it's basically the broadcast company that shows the Premier League and internationals as well and stuff. And when Cardiff City were in the Premier League, even before me watching the Bournemouth game, like just going back on on the highlights and stuff, I'd always go to the Neil Warnock press interview, post-match press interview, because I knew I was going to get a laugh from it, and he never failed me. He was just like one of these managers. I'm thinking, oh man, I hope Cardiff stay up, because I want Neil Warnock. I want to still continue watching Neil Warnock. And of course, I think it was that was a season when they signed that player from Nantes, and he flew over, and then his plane went missing. I can't remember what his name was, but
it was Salah, but not Mohammed. It was like Sala.
Yeah. Okay.
First name, yeah.
Yeah, that was. I mean, that was an absolute tragic. I mean, any death is tragic, but I mean, in those circumstances, a little plane going from Nantes I think it was via the Channel Islands, and then they were meant to go to somewhere in Cardiff or something to sign the deal and stuff. And they spent good money on him as well.
Well, yeah, it was an ongoing story afterwards. What would happen to the money? So would Cardiff still have to pay for him, or would they be reimbursed? I genuinely don't know what happened in the end, but I don't think it was something that got settled there and then. I think it went on for quite a while, because I think, they forked out for Cardiff. I would say it was probably in the tens of millions, I would say. So that's not the kind of money, especially if they were pretty much guaranteed to go down. That's money they could probably use elsewhere. That probably wasn't ideal, but in the grand scheme of things, probably was the right thing to do, not to kick up too much of a fuss.
Yeah. Well, given the fact that a death was involved, or actually two deaths, the pilot and the player, of course. But I wasn't expecting to talk about that. But obviously, I was trying to remember Neil Warnock's name, and I thought, I'll leave it. And then you mentioned it, and I'm thinking, there we go. So there's another video I've seen on Facebook. Your 18th birthday.
Oh yeah.
So tell me about it. Were you expecting it, or we can tell us about it anyway?
No, I was not whatsoever. It was a case of it was just a normal match day. And I'd normally do, so before I set up the commentary stuff, I'll do kind of the team sheets. So help out with that, get the information, get them printed out, and we have a couple of hospitality, bit of boardroom stuff. They get handed out. And then it was just a case of went down by the tunnel, and I said, just come into the dressing room quickly, and then all the lads are there. And I get the signed shirt, which is superb. Definitely not something I was expecting, but it's nice, especially when you kind of build a connection with most of them anyway. So you know them well regardless. So it's definitely, it was nice for sure.
Awesome. No, that's right. I mean, it's nice. I thought it wasn't, you didn't know about it, but of course you go there and you feel like, oh, okay, something's up, and it is your birthday and stuff. I noticed Josh McCoyd's in the squad. Is he
Yeah,
as a coach
yeah.
or what does he
So
do?
yeah, so he has been in and around Weymouth for a long time. So he was first a player, played up front for a fair amount of time. Then seems to drop back into midfield a bit. Then had, I can't remember what cancer, but he had cancer. Was
I
out
didn't know that.
for about a year. So about a year, did really well to get back from his treatment. Was originally came back as a first team coach, like a fitness coach, but seems to have picked up the boots again and is he played on Tuesday. He's been playing a fair few games for Weymouth this season, which is great. And especially for him, I would say that's ideal. I'm not sure even if you asked him whether he would have expected to come back to playing. But he's one of those players. He's obviously not as fast as he probably used to be, but
Yeah.
you can tell when a player has played to the standard that he has done. He's still got the technicality and the kind of tenacity that you would expect of a player that's got so many EFL appearances. So yeah, I would say it's great to have him still involved, and I think it's one of many Bournemouth connected players we've got at the minute. I mean, I suppose if you were to list them out, you've got Billy Terrell, who's on loan from Bournemouth. You've got Ben Greenwood, a former Bournemouth Academy player. Brooklyn Genesini, former Academy player. Keelan O'Connell is the same. Josh McCoyd, obviously. Brandon Goodship was at Bournemouth back in the day. I'm sure Mark Molesley, obviously. I'm sure there's some that I'm missing. But yeah, it definitely seems to be that the two clubs have that sort of connection, especially 2020 season when we got promoted to the National League. We had Jaden Anthony playing on the wing for us.
No way.
Yeah, so we
Wow.
got him on loan for I think it was a season or 6-month loan. Actually, no, it was less. It was like a 3-month loan at the end of the season to kind of try and help us over the line. So I think that was his first proper loan move. And there's a lot of clips out there of him saying kind of one of the key reasons behind his development was that first loan spell in kind of adult football. So he came to us, scored the winner or one of the goals in the playoff semi-final. And then, yeah, I think he is written into Weymouth history for that. So yeah, it's definitely nice to have those kind of stories between the two clubs. So we had Jaden Anthony, we had Sam Surridge, if you remember him. He was on loan at
Yes.
Weymouth for a little bit. Mark Travers was on loan at Weymouth for a little bit. There's a good clip on YouTube. I think it's one of Weymouth's most viewed videos. It's from about 2015, and it's Mark Travers scores a goal from a goal kick. So he's taken a goal kick and he's managed to lob the keeper from his own 6-yard box, which is
Did
I would
you say
encourage.
2015, was it?
Yeah. It's one of our earliest videos, but it's got a fair amount of views just because of obviously I suppose how he's turned out now. So yeah, I would say Bournemouth and Weymouth has definitely seemed to be connected pretty well, which is great for me as well personally, I guess.
Yeah, obviously having Bournemouth, strong Bournemouth connection and players that need game time, even at the academy level, and having. I mean, look, I think the division you're in, I think is the National League South. It's the sixth, the sixth tier. So I mean, that's competitive.
Yeah,
I mean,
for sure.
it's not like your your public. I mean, this is. I mean, like you said, you're not doing too well at the moment. Hopefully, obviously, things will turn around and stuff like that. But it's fair. It's fairly competitive. I mean, I've got Matt for our Matt here in Australia. He used to play for a team called Port Bella, and I used to I just joke with him when we're listing Champions League teams and I'll add Paul Barrett in and stuff like that. But I mean, he's saying how tough some of the games were, and he did mention Weymouth. So I mean, it's not it's a pretty high standard. What do you think's what's happening? Is it are there lots of injuries happening at the moment at Weymouth? Or is it new signings that haven't gelled, or what's preventing the team? Is it just the other teams are more established or strong, or what is it that's keeping Weymouth at the bottom or in the relegation zone at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it doesn't help when Brandon Goodship was our joint top goal scorer last season. and got a load of assists to go with it. He got injured, I think, during pre-season and has played, I think, 1 game since. He's still kind of on his way back. Hasn't been able to get on the pitch too much, but I think he's expected to be back soon. And then we've got a boy called Malachi Linton, who's a striker and has a lot of history in the league above. Dropped down with us for a little bit last season on loan from Yeovil, which is quite interesting given the history between the two clubs. Yeah, he came on loan, and then he obviously liked it enough to stay around, so we got him on a permanent in the summer. But then he got injured second game of the season, I think. But he's already got 2 goals from the first 2 games that he played in. So he's not back yet. So I suppose when you've got 2 key goal scorers out of the team, you're always going to struggle. And we've picked up a few injuries here and there. But I would say it's quite a strong league this year. I mean, it was strong last year as well, but especially the teams that have come up, they're quite rich teams, so they're able to facilitate at this level pretty well. So yeah, I think it's just a case of getting key players back and then just trying to pick points up. I would say the Christmas period, I suppose, for any league is vitally important. You know, you have a fair amount of games over that kind of November to January period. And then obviously it condenses a little bit more around December. So yeah, I think that's quite a big run of fixtures for us. Because obviously if we're to get ourselves safe, you're going to need some points out of that. So it makes for an interesting couple of weeks coming up, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking of a question that sort of escaped me at the moment, but now I love the complexity that you've got. The club logo has this beautiful ship. I remember the question also I was going to ask about the community. It's owned by the community, but I'll talk on the logo first. So it's a very ornate, very detailed ship, and the trend of late has been almost like, you know, how West Ham logo used to be like this beautiful castle and stuff, and they just minimalized it. And same for Arsenal, have this, you know, the cannon gun, all these little things in the background and stuff like that. Do you think, and this is a question that's just out there, do you think the Weymouth logo is going to undergo a simplification, or does everyone love the logo?
Yeah, I mean, I would say we did a logo change. We have done one in the past. I can't remember the year exactly, but I would say around 2009-ish. We tried a different direction with the badge that didn't really go down very well. So the badge we're at now is probably the favorite to stay around for quite a while. Yeah, it's interesting because Yeovil changed their badge this season. They announced that last season, and that is a prime example of why you don't change your badge, because the backlash that it does get outweighs the benefits you get. Because I think a lot of clubs use it as a kind of turning a new leaf. So this is the new us. We're on a new trajectory. We got new owners. We're going to kind of win it all. I suppose you look at maybe some of the failed ones. I think Leeds tried to change their badge, didn't they? Yeah,
they had this guy doing that. That was insane.
Yeah, so it was a case of a lot of clubs try and do that. They try and change their badge to kind of build this new enthusiasm for the club, which is something that I don't really think Weymouth need. I don't think, again, the negatives just outweigh it so much, because I think obviously a lot of non-league relies on returning fans, and a lot of the returning fans are slightly older, not perhaps able to travel as much. They go and watch their local team. I think if you were then to go and change the badge, the old heads that have been around the club a long time probably wouldn't be best pleased. And also, I think it's a great badge as it is, really.
It is. You know, I was looking at it. I'm thinking could do with a football somewhere, but not every badge has a football. So I guess that's the thing.
I think it's used in quite a lot of other things around Weymouth as well. So I think Weymouth Golf Club use the same kind of like ship logo as well. So it seems to be quite synonymous with the town, I guess. Obviously, being by the sea. Yeah.
So that ship, is that like a galleon, or is that something typical? Obviously, it reflects the maritime history, I guess, of Weymouth or the area. And I mean, the other thing is you're an Olympic venue as well, which had the Olympics there. Was it sailing? It was sailing, wasn't it?
Sailing, yeah, down at Portland.
Portland, that's right. Yeah. So if it reflects history and tradition, then you're right. The older generations are going to say, you know what, they increased the price of OXO and the pies at half time and stuff. And now they've gone and changed the logo and stuff like that. But what I did want to ask, I'm glad it came back to me, about the community. Is ownership? Is the actual club owned by the community? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's a case of, it's kind of I still think the majority stakeholder is the community sports kind of
Trust or something?
yeah. I think it's down as a supporters club, supporters trust. So they still hold a majority share. So it's not owned by a singular person. And then anyone is able to buy shares in it. So I've got a few. A couple of people I know have a few as well. So yeah, I think it's just a case of there isn't. We don't really have an owner per se, and not many clubs do, to be honest, around us. You'll get, I think, Poole have quite a couple of well-off people behind them, able to push them forwards. I think on that kind of trajectory, if you look at their recruitment for this season, like there's a lot of money floating around in the Southern League at the minute. Poole and Taunton that seem to be big spending. So yeah, Poole, I think, are probably maybe the slightly other example where they've probably got a group which fund it, I would say. Don't know for sure, but from what I know, I would say that's more how it sets up. Whereas I think for Weymouth, we have a chairman, but he's not a majority owner. So it's a case of, I think, that the funding just goes into the club, and we don't have one owner that just takes money out of his pocket, which I think a lot of clubs have tried at the lower levels. They've tried to have like a rich benefactor, and quite often it doesn't work. I mean, you've obviously got the slightly higher profile examples like your Wrexhams that just have that money, just throw at anything. But you see a lot of clubs just throw money at things, and sometimes it doesn't work. So one of, I suppose, the key example would be, I don't know if you've heard of them, at Darlington. They play in North.
They've got a 25,000 seater stadium that's just locked up or something.
Yeah, they built a brand new stadium because they thought they were on the way up, spent a load of money on it, and then just didn't become successful, and that now lies empty. I think.
I think it is. I mean, it would cost money to knock it down. It would cost money to do it up. So just leave it as it is. I mean, it's such a wasteful thing. Yeah. So did Weymouth become a supporter owned because of something, or was there a season where the owner of Weymouth squandered money, or what was the reason for becoming that trust?
Yeah, I think there hasn't been a specific moment where we've really struggled because of one person. I think we've been in our fair share of financial issues, but I think every non-league club has been. So I think it's just a case of calling on the fans at times to kind of help the club out financially, well within their right to do so. And I think it just stems from that, really. Obviously, fans have tried to help the club out as much as they can. So they thought, why don't we kind of take a majority share in the club? And yeah, I would say, I think it's probably about a 20% maybe that the supporters club have. But other than that, all the other people that I think hold shares are Weymouth fans anyway. So it is, you could almost say it's 100% fan owned, because all the people that have money in the club are fans of the club. That's the main reason they're there. Because obviously you don't go and invest money in a non-league club to make money. It just doesn't happen.
No.
So yeah, I would say it's majority owned by fans. Yeah.
Yeah, and most football clubs that have been invested, unless they're outside obviously the Premier League, but it's such a financial black hole. I remember someone saying that if you want to lose money quickly, you invest in a football club and in an airline. And I think Jack Walker, the ex-chairman or owner of Blackburn Rovers back in the 90s, he had both Blackburn and Jersey European Airways. So I mean, it was just lucky, I guess, that he won a Premier League title. But yeah, it's never straightforward, is it? I mean, that's the beauty of football as well, is that you just don't ever know how results are going to go. So but yeah, so I hope that Weymouth pick up some victories soon, and I hope that those players come back from injury. Is that a long-term injury, or is
well, they have been long-term injuries, but I would say most of them are you're probably measuring the time frame in weeks now, which is great. So yeah, I would hope next couple of weeks we should be back to full strength. That's the plan anyway. We'll see.
And start seeing those victories come back and keep Mark happy. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Isn't it? I've seen a couple of post-match pressers and stuff. And I think this guy's really interesting to listen to, and I mean, not just because he gave that famous Aldershot interview, but just because you can tell he's just passionate about football and stuff. So it's great. I haven't got anything else to say. Is there anything when you come into Australia? Because you actually did mention we posted something from the Sydney Derby last weekend. That's right. And you said, come down and watch Alex Paulson. So
sure.
yes, an interesting time. So are you following Auckland FC? I've got myself.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say I've been keeping an eye on things. Obviously, they got off to a pretty good start, didn't they? I would say, obviously, I think I can only name Paulson, and there's the former Marseille right back Sakai, isn't it?
Sakai,
Japanese, yeah. They're probably about the only two that I can name at the minute. But it's definitely interesting. I think it's the same with all of the clubs under kind of Black Knight. I would say I haven't really been following Lorient just because I think our relationship with them is slightly tenuous.
It's interesting, isn't it?
The Foley. And I think that is a bit of a key theme with Hibs as well. So there's quite a few Hibs fans that reach out to me consistently, just asking what various things. What various things mean for them. So it was like over the summer they'll be saying kind of who have you got in the academy that's going to come to us, kind of what's going on with that, because obviously last season we gave them Marcondes, we gave them Mariah Welsh. He's obviously still kicking about there, I think. So yeah, I would say just the relationship between the clubs, probably Lorient and Hibs isn't great at the minute, I would say. And then obviously you've got Auckland, and apparently there's going to be a new one in Portugal as well. Say, I think, was the one that I've heard most recently.
It might have changed.
Yeah, I think it's been bubbling around for ages. I think Foley's been shopping around trying to find another club to add to the portfolio.
Supermark.
Yeah,
if I was him, I'd get my relationship with Lorient and Hibs to better.
I would say, especially with Lorient, because if you look at their academy, the players that have come out of it, they are quite a good footballing side in France. They produce good young players. They play good young players. It's a good club to have money invested into. But it just seems as though, I mean, I suppose from a Lorient perspective, they get taken over and then we go and take Dango from them in January.
And Roman Fave.
And then also, I think they lost a lot of their key players as well. So they had a boy called Enzo Lefebvre, who I think is now at Rennes, possibly. So he was one of their star players, and they had a boy up top whose name I am forgetting, a Nigerian boy up top. I can't remember his name.
There is a player called Bamba, and I think he still plays for them this season because they relegated to League Two, the French League Two. He's been great.
Well, that's the thing.
But there's a couple of others, but I don't want to mention their names because then they get the spotlight back on them, and you don't want to sort of damage the relationship even further,
Yeah, for sure. I think there was one player that I looked at in my kind of summer transfer kind of preview thing, a boy called Isaac Toure, who was playing for Lorient, was like a 6 foot whatever, like 7 centre back. He was an absolute giant. He's about 20, was putting in some good performances, and it was a time where we were losing Lloyd Kelly and we didn't know whether we were going to get Howson in. Obviously, he's another tall young centre back who has an impeccably high ceiling. So we probably don't need Toure now. But yeah, I think that relationship with Lorient probably needs a bit more TLC, I'd say.
Yeah, I think so. But so what was the name of the Portuguese club again that you said?
I think it's Moreirense. I think they're about
Okay.
mid-table in the Portuguese league.
Right. Okay. Because it was about a month and a half where you mentioned Casapia,
Yeah, yeah. So they've
and
been
then maybe their facilities were pretty under par. But knowing Bill Foley, I guess he likes to build clubs up and grow them from the ground up. But maybe there was some sticking point, and maybe he's just moved on. But
yeah,
I was just curious. I mean, I would have thought it'd be the most natural that Bill Foley would look for a Spanish club because
mm,
I mean, Iraola is not going to stay forever, but at least using the knowledge of Iraola to do something similar with the Spanish club. Obviously, maybe not in the first division, but maybe maybe a second division team which has had a history of first division. Who knows? But we
yeah.
will never be privy to that, of course.
Yeah. I think it depends massively also which clubs are for sale. It sounds really obvious and
Exactly.
silly, but I think you look
It's
at
true.
the Portuguese league, and actually there are a lot of clubs there which are probably open for new investment. I would say the only
Mm,
kind of clubs that aren't is probably Porto, Benfica, Braga,
Sporting.
Sporting.
Mm,
I would say those are probably your only kind of big four in that league that probably aren't looking
mm.
for any sort of investment. Whereas I would say the Spanish league, I would say the vast majority of those clubs are probably pretty
More
settled.
settled. Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and also I think I mentioned it in one of the previous podcasts with a Portuguese club. You've got that South American connection, the Brazilian connection, and then you've also got the Angolan and Mozambique. You've got some African connection as well. So it's not a bad stepping stone as well. So yeah, we'll wait and see what happens. So awesome. Well, it's been absolute pleasure having you on. Finally managed to get you on, and no, it's just been brilliant having that great mixture of Bournemouth and what you do, and having some, a lot of discussion about Weymouth and having a look at that sixth tier in English football, because obviously all the focus is on Premier League and maybe Championship as well, and I believe, always supporting a local team. Always supporting a local team. So if you're in Weymouth area, go down to what's the stadium called again? Bob
stadium's
Smart.
Bob Lucas Stadium.
Bob, I've got Bob right. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, Smart is Mount Smart for Auckland FC. So I mixed the two
right.
stadiums together. But yeah, get on down to Weymouth. Then how much is the entry to a game normally?
So off the top of my head, I'm not sure because I'm lucky enough just to get let in for whatever. I would say it's probably an adult is probably around £15. I would say.
15. Yeah.
Um, Kids are obviously a lot cheaper. So family prices are probably quite affordable. But yeah, adult I would say is around 15.
Yeah.
Which I think for the league and for I would say it's a nice experience. Good food. It's a nice stadium. Fits a fair few seating as well. It's not all standing. So
Okay.
yeah, it's definitely
Come on
worth.
down.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for coming on to the Nick and Matt podcast, football podcast. And but I say this every time. We always forget to say like, comment, subscribe, share, and all that sort of stuff at the beginning because we just get straight into it and we have so much fun chatting to our guests, and then we've just remembered at the last minute, of course. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, what I'll do is I might put that link to Mark Molesley famous interview in the description. I've got it saved somewhere, and I'll do that because people are just wondering probably what is this all about. So, but yeah, no, it is a unique interview, and I recommend anyone to watch it. And yeah, thanks for coming on. And yeah, it's just gone past 9 p.m. here in Australia, and I believe your clocks are going backwards or forwards this weekend.
Soon, yeah, I think so. At
Soon.
the minute it's 11. So yeah, hopefully not too soon. But yeah,
Not to say. All right, Robert. Thanks so much for coming on, and yeah, and I look forward to continuing to see your Twitter feeds, your X feeds, and all the information you share. It's been great, actually. I've really enjoyed going through that and learning, and and keeping my knowledge up to date on Bournemouth, especially. So thanks so much for everything.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me on. It's been really lovely to chat. Obviously, we've said all things Bournemouth, Weymouth, and everything in between. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Awesome. Take care.
Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah.